This morning we're going to be doing, there will be 5 speakers, as you can see, and we will be doing a tribute to Swami Kriyananda, to his life. But I wanted to thank David. I assume it was you who chose those 2 songs. They were absolutely perfect. They kind of summarized the whole of the theme, not just of Swami's life, but of what he has created. Blessed is the life when the heart is open to God's love, and also blessed is the life that's led in complete attunement to the will of God. The 5 of us, I would have to say, have had our lives entirely defined by our relationship with Master and with Swami. Each of us, I'll speak first, and then Diana, who's currently living in India. It's hard to say geographically where anyone belongs anymore. We've been mixed around so much, but I'll say where we currently are. So Diana is currently living in India and has been for the last 3.5 years or so. And then Hriman will speak. He's currently located mainly in Seattle, and Asha from Palo Alto, and Devi will speak at the end, and she and I are living here, at least at this point. So we're going to speak about Swami, our relationship to Swami, and some of the ways that he has influenced us. But as he did yesterday, he didn't want to speak just for himself, just about his life, his relationship with Master, because it kind of like something in parentheses is closed on both ends that way. Rather, he wanted to speak, and we want to speak, about those ways that Swami has connected with us and taught us and helped us that are universal, and that we're really only symbols in a certain sense for the relationship that he has had with all of you and with many thousands of people around the world that are not seen here this morning. I first met Swami in early 1967, a little over 41 years ago, and literally my lessons with him began at the very moment that I met him. He introduced, I had found, my brother-in-law had found his address after reading the autobiography. He was talking with someone about how wonderful that book was, and this person said, well, I know where there's a direct disciple of Yogananda who's living in San Francisco. We were in San Jose at the time, and gave us his address. And we went one Sunday afternoon and knocked on his door, and he opened it, a little apartment in the avenues in San Francisco, and he introduced himself. We introduced ourselves, and he invited us in and said, I'm working on a project. Would you like to help? And when I said yes to that, that was the beginning of a long life of association. But so the relationship began immediately. Not only was he inviting me to join with him, and he's made that same invitation, as I've said, to many thousands of people. So that invitation to join with him, but that after that very afternoon, he did 2 things. One, we worked on his project, which was he was doing classes in San Francisco, and he was sending out a mailing. And so we were addressing envelopes and putting stamps on and stuffing the little flyer in and sending that out. But then we went out after we finished for a picnic in Golden Gate Park. And at that time, he began talking about a little bit about his life with Master. Just completely naturally, he began talking about the foods that we were eating and how food had certain qualities to it. And he talked a little bit about a few foods and the qualities. Bananas represent humility, and eating bananas helps you develop that quality. Cherries are for joy, and so on. And he talked a little bit about his life with Master, and he had a guitar, and he sang a couple of songs, and it was absolutely charming in that first afternoon. He not only captured my mind, but much more importantly, he captured my heart. And from that time on, I began taking classes with him. But that is, as I say, symbolic of the relationship that he's had with so many people. He's been a teacher, he's been a friend, and he's been a model of how to live. His whole life has been dedicated to helping us understand how to live life on a higher plane. You know, he was talking yesterday about how in that walk in Charleston, South Carolina, how he had that understanding that if there was a universal consciousness, only that could be God, an infinite consciousness. And it was our job to try to attune our consciousness to that. And the closer we came, the higher we were able to raise our level of consciousness, the closer we would come to that. And that is an extremely important kind of metaphysical concept that we should really understand. The whole of life is raising our consciousness and attuning it to God. The whole of life is the relationship to God. One time we saw a beautiful painting in sepia tones. So it wasn't a dramatic painting, but it was a beautiful painting by Leonardo da Vinci in the Uffizi in Italy, in Florence. And in that, there was the Madonna, and she was holding the baby Jesus. And around her were a group of people. And what the painting was about was that the Madonna and the baby Jesus especially were giving off a light. And so the source of light, when one does a painting, one always has to be aware of where the source of light is coming from. In this painting, the source of light was coming from the Madonna and the baby, and it was radiating out. So it wasn't coming from the side or the top or as it would normally be. And there were a group of characters around, and each character represented a different relationship to the divine. And the way that that was portrayed was how the light hit them or didn't hit them. And so right up at the feet was a young man, and he was kneeled down, and he was in deep devotion, and his face was bathed with light. And there was another person kind of half turned, and his face was half in shadow and half in light. And over toward the edge there was someone turned away, and his face was in complete obscurity. And so it is, as we have this relationship to the light, to God's energy, so it is that that is able to enlighten our path. Well, for us, Swamiji and his relationship to Master has been that source of light. And according to how we are able to relate to that, our face is either bathed and our life is either bathed in that light, or it's a little bit in obscurity, a little bit more in obscurity, or totally in shadow if we have turned away from that. What happened is that Swami really was prepared by many lifetimes, as all of us are, but he was prepared for many, many lifetimes to become the vehicle to bring Master's teachings to so many thousands of people. And it was as if he were, since we're talking about light, it was as if he were a candle ready to be lit by Master. And he was, as he explained so beautifully yesterday, his heart was searching and searching and searching until finally, in the moment of supreme fulfillment, he found the autobiography, met Master, and was accepted by him. So it was that deep, deep yearning of his heart and his soul. So Master empowered Swami by lifting up his consciousness and helping to attune it. And that is, in essence, what he has done for all of us, and in essence, what we must do in order to make our lives also be meaningful. We have to, one, accept kind of the spark or the enlightenment or the uplifting energy that has come to us from our spiritual lineage, the whole of the line of gurus, but especially Master and Swami, and lighting our consciousness, and then we have to help carry that light on to others. That's the way of God. That's the way of this spiritual path. But I also want to talk a little bit about some ways that Swami has particularly affected my life, and each of us will share in that way. I was fortunate. It was my good karma to be one of the first to come and meet Swami, first of the people who have continued and stayed on. And I would say, as I was saying generally, that my entire life has been defined by my relationship with Swamiji. In many ways, I think of him as being kind of like the architect and I'm the contractor. And I'm not the only contractor. He's got a whole bunch of contractors that he's got working. And so he has the vision, but then that vision has to be carried out. But that process of having a vision and carrying it out is one of the things that has most affected me about Swamiji's life and about his role model for us. That too started young. Many, young, early in Swami's life, many people have ideals. Everybody, I would say, has some ideals. Often there is the idealism of youth, and then gradually as people age a little bit, they begin to make compromises with life, and those ideals are kind of suppressed and put on the back burner or stuffed way back into a closet on a top shelf where no light is going to get to them. But Swami's life has been about living according to your ideals. I think that is one of the things that for me is most impressive about what he's done, is that instead of having a thought, having an ideal, and saying, oh yes, but it's so far away, it's so hard, it's so impossible in this world, we won't bother about it. He hasn't said that. He's led the kind of life, had the kind of energy, had the kind of creativity, and deep attunement with Master and the flow of the divine that has allowed those ideals to come into manifestation. There's that beautiful dream or vision that Master had about being in a dusty village in India, and everyone kind of hot and dry, and he was looking around, and every once in a while someone would look up and they'd get this wistful yearning on their face, and then they would kind of slump and look down and go back to their work again. And he saw many people do that. And he looked up and he saw this high mountain, beautiful, cool, and uplifting. And he thought, oh, how beautiful, how I would love to go there. And then he thought, oh, but it's so high and it's so hard. How could I possibly make it? And he too was about to look down, and then he thought, but I can at least take the first step. And so he, unlike anyone else, took the first step toward that journey. Well, that's what Swami has done for us. He's shown that first step, toward living according to your ideals can be taken. And once the first step is taken, the second one is easier, and the third even easier, until gradually you wonder why in the world the whole world isn't taking this journey with you. Don't you have that feeling? It's such a natural way to live, such a beautiful way to live. The life of Ananda, the life of living according to the ideals and the attunement with God. It's such a beautiful life. Why isn't, we have a nice group here. We have many hundred people here. Why don't we have many hundreds of thousands and millions of people who say naturally this is the way to live? Why? Isn't time yet. A few hundred years into Dwapara, and people will begin to accept that this is the natural way to live. For the beginning of Dwapara, we have the blessing, the great blessing, of being able to create a model that others can not only live by but improve upon. But that has been, above all else, what Swami has done that has so inspired me, is that he has lived according to deep attunement with Master, and then he has said, it is not just an ideal, it is not just a dream, a vision, but nothing that can be practical. He has said, we can live this way, and he's shown a model of how to do that. And that taking from, so it's, what it really is it's taking the ideal is on the causal plane. And then most people will touch a little bit on that causal plane. They'll catch that little ideal, but then that's the end of it. But then that ideal has to come down into the astral plane, meaning that enough energy and thought and consciousness and attunement and accepting the flow of the divine has to energize that ideal, and then when it's sufficiently energized, it can be produced on the material plane. And that's been the life of Swami. He's in many ways, he's lived more in the causal plane than he has on the physical plane. And so he's kind of a causal astral being, and thankfully the rest of us are more physical astral beings, and so we have a role in this too. And so he's allowed us to carry on the work of creating this beautiful life. But the ideal, the thought that your ideals can be lived, they can be brought into manifestation, and the way to do that is to hold your consciousness up and attune it to the light so that it bathes you and it works through you. That, and the other theme that has been most dear to me, is the divine friendship that Swami has had for so many, many people. And I'll just end with a story that, in many ways, for me, epitomizes that. This took place in Rome, probably in 1984. And we were in Italy at the time because the Italian work was just about to get started. There had been grouped together in the summer, and so it would have been late, probably around October in 1984. And it was the last night before Swami was going to be returning to America. Devi and I were staying on and going to try to help get the work started and more solidified. We would be traveling up to northern Italy. But this particular night was a night where we had gone out for dinner at a dear friend, with a dear friend in Rome of Swamiji's. And she had been a long-time friend of his. Renata Arlini was her name, and she was Roman nobility. I don't know whether she was literally a duchess, but she certainly had the vibration of being a contessa. And she certainly had that vibration. And during that evening, we had many meals with her, and often during one of the meals, she would say, "Excuse me, I'll be right back." And it was like Merlin going into his closet. And then she would come back with something that was very special. But this night, it was exceedingly special indeed. She came back and she had a little cassette tape. And that cassette tape was Master speaking. The only time we had ever heard Master speak was what SRF had released up until that time, which was, I think, the prayer at dawn. And it was Master's voice, yes, but certainly not speaking. It was a booming prayer and with a lot of energy, but not speaking in a natural way. And so we came back and we played that cassette tape, and it was Master speaking at his last birthday party in that beautiful way. For those of you who've heard it, probably most of you have, that beautiful way where there was so much love and so much humor and so much joy and humanity. And it was such a special, special time. And Swami gave us a blessing, and then we said good night, and that was it. But it was interesting, on the way home, he said to us, we were just walking, it was a few blocks from Renata's house to the hotel where we were staying. And on that walk, he said, "You know, it's strange. I couldn't begin to count how many nights, how many dinners, in how many countries, in how many different languages," because it had been mainly in Italian that evening. And it was very poignant. It was the revelation of a whole life of divine friendship, dinners, not just lectures, not just impersonal. Most of the teaching that Swami gives is in that impersonal vein, but also this very dear, this divine friendship that he has extended, and that divine friendship has touched the hearts of so many, many people and has awakened in them the fire and the desire for God that resides and is the essence of who Swamiji is.